Дали се чуваме сега? 1, 2, 3, проба. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? We are making a test with the speakers only.
Video restart. Yes, Mr. Bozhelov, I can hear you. Can you hear
Hello,
me?
madam. Hello, Madam Ambassador. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, excellent connection.
Perfect, perfect.
Yeah. We are still waiting for some more people to join.
Of course, of course.
Actually, I'm admitting only speakers now, and I'll let other participants to join a couple of minutes before
Fine.
we start.
So we have about 5 minutes. I will rejoin you in about 5 minutes or so.
Yes, yeah, we have actually almost 10 minutes.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Plamen, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hi there.
Everything goes well. Just to remind you that we are broadcasting, so everything what you see on the screen goes on YouTube.
Excellent.
Okay, I will switch myself off and let's join in 5 to 6 minutes.
Excellent. Talk to you.
Hello, Elena. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, Elena.
Здравей, здравей.
Здравей. Само да предупредя, че бродкастваме вече към YouTube, така че всичко върви. It was just a test to see how the connectivity is. But I see everything is okay.
Yes,
Okay.
it works well. No problem.
Excellent. We'll start in 5 to 6 minutes, probably.
Okay, very well. So see
Excellent.
you
See
in a
you.
couple of minutes then.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum, Ambassador Saiba. How are you, Mariam?
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Thank you so much for joining. कैसे हैं, sir?
Thank you very much. Very kind. नहीं, बहुत अच्छा है. I'm glad. Thank you for your initiative.
We have been working very hard with the Sophia Security Forum, sir. So I think this is a good start, inshallah. And thank you so much to your team also for being so receptive.
Absolutely, absolutely, Doctor. I always keep calling her Dr. Amina Khan. It's better she gets her doctorate quickly. Yeah, Amina
Hello,
Khan
good
is,
afternoon from Sofia.
Hello, hello. How are you? Very nice to see you, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, as some of the speakers are already on, just let me say a couple of administrative remarks. So I will say some words, mainly technical announcements to all participants. We'll have, as it is in the agenda, opening remarks, and after that, we'll go according to the program. There are some minor changes. Mr. Plamen Tonchev will speak on behalf of European think tanks first. And at the last panel, we'll have Barbara Kelemen. Probably we'll take 8 to 10 minutes for initial presentations, followed by Q&A session. Yeah, do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
Perhaps we could introduce ourselves to break the ice. If I may, I'm Plamen Tonchev.
Yes, Plamen, please. I'm still working on some technical issues here.
Sure. I'm
Yeah, I see
Plamen Tonchev.
Chris is joining us also.
Chris is joining us. Right.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so if I may, let me tell you that I'm based in Athens, Greece, but otherwise I'm of Bulgarian descent myself, involved in Asian affairs forever, including Pakistan, for quite a bit, I must say. Then I suppose I could give the floor to others to present themselves.
All right.
Elena, your ambassador, yeah.
Yeah, I am Azaz Ahmad Chaudhry. I was a member of the Foreign Service of Pakistan, and I have served as the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan. And my last diplomatic assignment was as Ambassador of Pakistan to the United States. And for the last 3 years, I am heading this think tank, Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. And we have 5 centers of excellence, one of which deals with Afghanistan, Middle East, and Africa, Kenya, and it is the Kenya which is making arrangements for this event today. Ms. Amna Khan, who will be also speaking during the session, is heading that.
Okay,
So
excuse me, just to interrupt you, as it is 1 p.m. exactly, I'm admitting all people who applied. So just to let you know. And as I said, we are also live streaming to YouTube.
If I may ask Mr. Jordan Bazilov, President of Sofia Security Forum, would you like to start, and then I'll take over and give some welcome remarks, and then our ambassador can speak and others can speak? Is that?
Yes, I'll have to make also some technical announcements. So I will start without making presentation, and I'll invite you actually to make opening remarks as it is in the program. So we'll have we'll have Madam Ambassador Aftap and Elena. Yeah. I think that we'll wait for 1 or 2 minutes more as more people are joining. Obviously, the topic is, of course, attracting a lot of interest. As I said, we'll have participants on Zoom and on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start the seminar in 2 minutes. Thank you for your patience. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is right time to start our online conference on Afghanistan. I see some people are joining still, but let me say to all of you, good afternoon from Sofia. We have people who participate in Zoom or watch online on YouTube. I'm Yurdan Buzilov and chairman of Sofia Security Forum, and I have the pleasure of moderating this discussion today on the situation in Afghanistan. But before we start, may I ask you to mute your microphones. After the speeches, you will be able to comment or ask questions. Use the chat or raise your hand. You have this raised hand option in the lower right corner of the screen. Excellencies, distinguished partners from the Embassy of Pakistan, colleagues from the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad, colleagues from Southeast European Center for Asia Pacific Studies, dear participants. No doubt that Afghanistan is one of the main topics for the regional and international security. And it is focused of many countries, various organizations, and undoubtedly European Union and Pakistan are among the main stakeholders. That's why we have invited well-known analysts from European and Pakistani think tanks, so they'll be able to share their views and assessments on the situation in Afghanistan. But before I give them the floor, I would like to invite Ambassador Aziz Ahmad Shukri, Director General of the Institute for Strategic Studies in Islamabad, for his opening remarks. So, Ambassador, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President Bozilov, President of the Sofia Security Forum. It is a great way to interact and learn from each other, and I'm sure this very subject will provide yet another opportunity to know each other's perspective. I'm also grateful to Ambassador Mariam Aftab, Pakistan's ambassador in Sofia, who has played a key role in putting this together. Afghanistan, South Asia, Central Asia developments are all very, very dire, and we need to talk about them. We know that Europe has always remained interested in this area, so it is good for us to know Europe's perspective. And it is also good for Europe to know how we look at the developments taking place in Afghanistan. The concept note that you have circulated already lays the ground. I know that for Afghanistan, no country is affected more than Pakistan, which is not only a neighbor of Afghanistan, but have also suffered from the instability in Afghanistan for the past 4 decades. 3 million refugees from Afghanistan have lived in Pakistan for more than 40 years. And we have had many anti-Pakistan elements, terrorist elements, taking refuge inside Afghanistan. We also know that the region as a whole has also suffered from the lack of peace in Afghanistan, and that is why Pakistan and other neighbors of Afghanistan, including Central Asian countries of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, as well as Iran and Russia and China. All of them are coordinating very closely because the whole region has suffered from lack of peace in Afghanistan. And we in the Institute of Strategic Studies have been holding conversations on Afghanistan from different perspectives. So far, we have held 7 to 8 conversations, including one from Europe's perspective, as to understand how Europe is looking at our region, and also the broader dynamics that are going to be affecting Central Asia, South Asia, as well as Indo-Pacific region. For example, the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative of China, the US-China major power competition in the Indo-Pacific region, and all these developments are also of common and shared interest. But nothing is more urgent and pressing at this time than the desire for peace inside Afghanistan. And that's why all these efforts to understand each other's perspectives assume new and greater importance. And we are very, very happy that Sofia Security Forum has taken this initiative. And we have some very learned speakers from Pakistan side. I know Ambassador Asif Durrani, who has served in Kabul, who has also served in as our ambassador to Iran. And then we have Ms. Amina Khan. She has been writing extensively and publishing her research papers on Afghanistan situation. And then we'll have Dr. Talat Shabir, who is heading the China-Pakistan Study Center and has worked extensively on our relations with China. So from our side, it's a very, very enriching and scholarly participation. And I'm sure from the Bulgarian side also we will have same. So I look forward to engaging discussion this afternoon. And once again, thank you so much, Sofia Security Forum, especially Mr. President Jordan Ozilov. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Choudhury. I truly believe that Europe and Pakistan needs each other, especially when it comes to the cooperation vis-a-vis Afghanistan. And also, I hope that this event will just mark future cooperation between your organization, the Institute for Strategic Studies in Islamabad, Sofia Security Forum, and the Southeast European Center for Asia Pacific Studies. Once again, thank you very much for partnering with us. But I have to say that this event is organized with the special assistance from the Embassy of Pakistan in Sofia, and I would like particularly to mention the contribution of the Ambassador of Pakistan to Bulgaria, Her Excellency Mariam Aftab. And I would like to invite you, Madam Ambassador, for your welcoming remarks to our audience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bozhilov, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here this afternoon for this online discussion on a very important subject, security implications of developments in Afghanistan, views from Europe and Pakistan. I'm extremely grateful to the Sofia Security Forum and the newly established Southeast European Center for Asia Pacific Studies for partnering with us to organize this event. And we certainly hope that this will be the first of many such discussions and that it will help to build bridges between academics and scholars in Southeast Europe and Pakistan. I'm also extremely grateful to the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad and the Center for Afghanistan, the Middle East and Africa, and particularly to Director General Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, who has been a senior colleague and who responded immediately and very promptly and positively to our request to partner for this discussion today. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all the distinguished scholars who are presenting today, and to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, who have found time to participate and to listen to this online discussion. I look forward to what promises to be a very interesting, very engaging, and productive afternoon. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Madam Ambassador. And as we mentioned already several times, CECAPS, or Southeast European Center for Asia Pacific Studies. Now I'd like to invite the Executive Director of this newly established center, Elena Atanasova Cornelis, also founding member of CECAPS. Elena, I invite you for your welcoming remarks to our broad audience.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It's really a pleasure to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, dear friends, colleagues. Yes, the center has been mentioned several times. I just would like to mention that my expertise is Asia-Pacific. I'm a senior lecturer in international relations of Asia-Pacific at the University of Antwerp in Belgium and Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium as well, visiting professor at Kent University in the UK and associate fellow at the Geneva Center for Security Policy. And I specifically focus on alliances and alignments in broader Indo-Pacific, so a topic of increasing relevance also for the European Union in the framework of all these minilateral groupings, quadrilateral groupings, and many other different arrangements that countries are seeking now to respond to the changing regional dynamics in the broader Asian region. And indeed, together with Jordan Bozilov and Plamen Tonchev, we have recently established our Southeast European Center for Asia-Pacific Studies, based in Sofia, Bulgaria, with the main objective of seeking to fill a gap not only in Bulgaria, but in Southeast Europe. And generally, I would expand it to Europe in general on expertise on political, security, geo-economic relations in the Asia-Pacific region. So our objective is essentially, to become a hub of that expertise by focusing on organizing conferences, seminars, publications, focusing on, in the future, we intend to provide courses and training courses for younger generation of Europeans and Asians, as these, of course, the younger generation are our future, the future of handling relations between the European region or Southeast European region and Asia. So we have two areas of expertise I would like, or areas in which we will be developing our research center. And I would like to stress that on the one hand, we will look at the international relations in the Asia-Pacific with a focus on various economic, geopolitical issues, multilateralism, regional institutional building. But the second area is equally important. We'll look at various bilateral, minilateral, multilateral relations in the Asia-Pacific, and in particular relations with Southeast Europe and the Balkans. So essentially, we want to provide that bridge between the two regions for strengthening relations, understanding, and of course, greater mutual involvement between Asia and Europe, broadly defined. And I think the timing of the establishment of that research center could not have been better, of course, with the publication of the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy just a month ago, to which the previous speakers have referred. And indeed, the EU now has given greater attention to the region, as the region is rising increasingly in importance, not only from an economic perspective, obviously for us in Europe, our largest, most important trading partners are in that region, but also from a geopolitical perspective as well, with all the developments happening. One of the issues, Afghanistan, of course, the topic of today's session. But if I look further east, the situation, Korean Peninsula, Taiwan, South China Sea, East China Sea, Sino-Japanese relations, which is much closer also to my area of expertise, I can say that certainly these dynamics are very critical for Europe for a better understanding. Now, the Indo-Pacific strategy of the European Union is, of course, a topic for, I guess, for a whole separate session. But I would like to say, because I'm at the moment finalizing a new policy brief on that issue, and I will not take a lot of time on discussing what I have found, as it will be for another seminar. I just would like to mention that it's quite interesting when you read that Indo-Pacific strategy, that the kind of the leitmotif, I can say, of that strategy is partnership and inclusivity. In other words, the Indo-Pacific strategy of the EU is much more than China. So my reading of that strategy shows that, yes, China remains an important partner for the European Union, but the Indo-Pacific is very much beyond China, and partnering with various countries, organizations, in order to jointly seek solutions to shared problems and challenges. Of course, very much in line with the EU key objectives in the region, which have been, of course, the emphasis of multilateralism and engagement. So I think it's quite interesting to look in the way, the thinking within the EU, and especially here in Belgium and in Brussels, has evolved with regard to the Asia Pacific. Of course, most of you may know that some of the criticism expressed by many countries in Asia, and that I have observed on many occasions while traveling to the region, has been that the EU, sometimes tends to kind of define these very ambitious objectives in the region, whereas delivers not so much after that. So there has been that certain criticism that words and deeds do not always kind of, follow each other, rather deeds following words in the case of the European Union. But my assessment of that new strategy, and of course the way I read it, is that there is a clear understanding within the European Union of what the EU's really strengths are and how the EU can double down on its strength in order to be able to deliver really in the region. And of course, Afghanistan, of course, the topic of today's session is one of the critical aspects of which we are following very closely on how this policy will be evolving. And we have, of course, the best and excellent speakers to discuss that topic for our audience this afternoon. So I will stop here, as it was supposed to be just an opening statement. Again, a very warm welcome from me as well, and from our newly established Southeast European Center for Asia-Pacific Studies. And we are absolutely delighted that this is one of our first initiatives, of this new kid on the block, so to speak, now based in Bulgaria. So we hope to see you also in the future, of course, in many of the other events in the coming months and years. So that was all from me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Elena, first for presenting to our audience the CECAPS, or Southeast European Center for Asia-Pacific Studies, and thank you for touching upon a very important issue, which will be, of course, debated for months, I would say, if not years, namely the recently adopted EU strategy on Indo-Pacific region. Thank you once again. Now we'll move to our speakers. As you see, we have three pairs of speakers. The first topic which we'll debate, it is about the dynamics in the South and Central Asia region, factors, trends, and directions of likely future developments in the region. We have two excellent speakers, Mr. Plamen Tonchev, who is Merrick's European China Policy Fellow and Head of Asia Unit of Institute of International Economic Relations in Greece, but also he's an co-executive director of CECAPS. And we have also Ambassador Asif Durrani, former ambassador of Pakistan to Iran. So I would like to ask our first speakers to make their short presentations. Please, Plamen Tonchev.
All right, thanks very much indeed, Jordan, and ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. It's a pleasure to be the company of very senior diplomats and researchers, but it's also a great pleasure to have this event, which is the birthplace of CECAPS, this new institution. So if I may say so, the 25th of October 2021 is the birth date of this newly set up center. Let me quickly move on to presenting what I think of the situation in Afghanistan and the broader region. Some introductory remarks on my part, which I hope will provide the basis for what is expected to be a fascinating discussion. I think that we needn't go through Afghanistan's sad story. We all know what's happened over the past 4 decades. I think that the $1 trillion question here, excuse me, the $1 trillion question here is, what next? What will the day after look like? Where's Afghanistan heading? And how's the international community, this fuzzy notion of international community, how is it going to go about Afghanistan as it is today? And just as importantly, how are neighboring countries, including Pakistan, of course, in particular, going to handle this intractable conflict on their doorstep? I'm inclined to see the situation in Afghanistan and the broader region in the form of 3 concentric circles around Afghanistan, depending on 2 key factors. The first factor, that determines a country's attitude towards Afghanistan has to do with being in the vicinity and having skin in the game. And the second factor, which determines the attitude of countries towards Afghanistan, is their willingness to engage with the interim Taliban government. But at the same time, what matters a lot is to what extent these countries are accepted by the interim Taliban government. So these three concentric circles, if I may use this simile, make me think of a bit of a theatre performance. Do allow me this simile. I'm based in Greece, which is proud of having developed the notion of theatre in antiquity. So let me quickly go through the three circles. The very first circle includes Afghanistan's 6 neighbors: Pakistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and China, of course. All these countries have skin in the game, even though their positions differ quite a bit for a number of reasons. But it would also make a lot of sense to add to this first circle 3 more countries: Russia, Qatar, and Turkey. And I would call these 9 countries that sit in the front row actors in the Afghanistan drama. The second circle includes major powers that have, for various reasons, taken seats a bit further away from the front row. The second circle includes, of course, the United States, the EU, the United Kingdom, Japan, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Australia, and other countries that have been involved in the Afghanistan saga for many years, but are now called upon to adjust their policies to the new circumstances. I would call these countries actors in waiting. In other words, actors awaiting their turn to enter the scene or waiting for the right conditions conducive to entering the scene. And the third circle includes all the rest, a wide array of members of the international community, which are, of course, interested in developments in Afghanistan, but have no compelling reasons for the time being to take initiatives and join the other 2 circles. I would call these countries in the third circle spectators, but mind you, I do not attach any denigrating, any negative connotation to these terms, spectators. Let me quickly go through the first circle and its features. I think that a key feature of the countries from the first circle is that they all have skin in the game. They're all very much interested in what's happening next door. They have their insights. They have excuse me, a profound understanding of what's going on in Afghanistan. And of course, they are all eager to see a stable and peaceful Afghanistan. But conversely, they all have their grave concerns about an Afghanistan sinking into chaos, violence, and a humanitarian crisis. These concerns are the second key feature of the countries in the front row. All the neighbors worry that an unstable Afghanistan will bring about a surge in the export of refugees, extremism, or drugs. Yet another key feature and a common denominator of the first circle actors is the fact that their views and priorities do not necessarily coincide. And I think that Tajikistan is very much a case in point. As you know, Dushanbe is the most vocal opponent of the Taliban authorities at present and has on a number of occasions put forward proposals for a more inclusive government, basically pushing for the representation of the Tajik community in Afghanistan. Let me move on to the second circle. A common feature of the countries seated in the second row is that they have all been involved until recently in the peace building and reconstruction effort in Afghanistan, the one that ended abruptly and infamously last August. First and foremost, of course, the United States, which led the military campaign back in October 2001, right after September 11th, and pulled out chaotically 20 years later. The EU has also been heavily involved in terms of providing massive development aid to Afghanistan, but also in terms of military presence under ISAF command. And so have the United Kingdom and Australia, of course. In turn, India, Japan, Canada, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and others have offered financial and development aid over the past 20 years. All these countries, which I call actors in waiting, allow me this term, are now scrambling to recalibrate their relations with Afghanistan, but are facing to varying degrees problems navigating the current political setting. Some of these countries, mostly Western ones, and I would say to a certain extent India, are finding it difficult to engage with the Taliban directly, let alone grant them international recognition. Other countries like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and again India, I would say, relate their priorities to regional competition. For instance, Saudis and the Emirates are not happy to see Iran, Qatar, and Turkey in the front row. India is not happy to see Pakistan take the lead in negotiations with the Taliban, nor is it happy to see China cast a long shadow over Afghanistan. And needless to say, the United States, the protagonist in the Afghanistan drama over the past 20 years, is finding itself in an extremely odd position. Though, of course, Washington still retains a lot of its political weight, economic levers, and military firepower not too far away from Afghanistan. And as we know, Americans have been trying to regain ground through military facilities in the broader region, be it in Pakistan or in Central Asia, though to no avail at this stage, as I understand. Now, let me move on to the EU, since this is a talk about the EU and Pakistan, and we want to compare notes on Afghanistan. Very quickly, two general points. While talking directly to the Taliban interim authorities in Afghanistan is politically tricky for Europeans, at the same time, the EU is seeking to act as a facilitator or catalyst for some sort of broader international consensus on two key issues. A, preventing a major humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, and B, mitigating risks deriving from the current setup in the country. Now, you have to bear in mind, I'm turning to my Pakistani colleagues, you have to bear in mind that the EU is a complex multinational entity, and internal debates are invariably marked by a lot of different views on just about anything, including Afghanistan, of course, which is a tricky issue by default. So one needs to distinguish between views expressed by EU institutions and then views expressed by individual member states. Some examples before I finish. At the level of EU institutions, you know that Josep Borrell, the High Representative, has already given a hint earlier this month on his blog when he wrote, and I quote, "The question is not if we should have a minimal EU presence in Afghanistan, and all member states agree. The question is when and how. We are working on possible options taking into account the security situation," end of quote. And indeed, it has now become clear that the EU is mulling reopening its diplomatic mission in Kabul, possibly in about a month. Although there are still pending open questions regarding the operational modalities and security arrangements and all that. But in any case, engagement with the Taliban is expected to remain limited. Now, when it comes to EU member states, France, as you may know, has expressed its objections, in fact, rather vehement objections to the idea of granting the Taliban international recognition. So on this count, Paris is actually quite close to the position of Dushanbe. Italy is also a big EU member state, and you will remember that recently Mario Draghi, the Italian Prime Minister, hosted the extraordinary G20 summit in Rome on Afghanistan, and he has also hinted that we have to coordinate efforts with the Taliban one way or another. To sum up, I know that I'm running out of time. 2 points. The EU will find it difficult to offer international recognition to the Taliban government as of today. The EU cannot bypass its institutional and political constraints, and it cannot grant international recognition to a Taliban-led government which is not sufficiently inclusive in terms of ethnic representation or women's participation. These are conditions sine qua non. But at the same time, and that's my last point, the EU, while it is seated in the second row, it has not been ostracized from Afghanistan. It is definitely seeking ways to get back to the first row in due time and in a way that's both meaningful in humanitarian terms and politically acceptable. Not an easy equation, not an easy exercise, but there we are. Thanks very much for your patience. I'll be happy to take questions during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Plamen. Indeed, we'll have to see what the role you play in Afghanistan. Now, I would like to invite Ambassador Asif Durrani, former ambassador of Pakistan to Iran, for his assessment of the situation and factors and trends which will be important ones for the development in the region. Ambassador, please.
Thank you, Mr. Yordan Bozhilov. Excellency Azaz Chaudhry, dear friends, and I also recognize Ambassador Mariam Aftab, seeing you after a long time. You look good. And yes, today's theme is very important, especially with regard to the dynamics in South and Central Asia region, and those factors which are, in fact, directing the likely future developments in the region. The theme itself is quite comprehensive. And Mr. Plamen Tonchev has very excellently articulated the issues which are there. He has given us a wider horizon, especially with regard to the EU. There are no doubts there are challenges. And those challenges are becoming more serious with the advent of winters in Afghanistan. Now you have to prioritize whatever, whether at the political plane or at the strategic plane, we have to prioritize this whole problem, which is now Afghanistan. This is just not a country. Here, now, for instance, 10 years ago, there was no presence of Daesh or ISIS in Afghanistan. But now we hear about the presence of ISIS in Afghanistan. And the strange thing is that it happened under the watches of the US and NATO. So I think the EU cannot absolve itself of the responsibility that it has left Afghanistan in a mess. Second issue is that there has been an agreement between the Taliban and the United States, under which, by and large, United States agreed to withdraw from Afghanistan, almost without conditions. In fact, it is the United States which has to fulfill conditions, especially with regard to delisting of the Taliban from 1267/1988 sanctions list. That has not taken. And they had to be delisted by 27th May 2020. It has not taken place. If Taliban have not given the promises as they are being made out, the question was to enter into an intra-Afghan dialogue. I think they did. And the result is in front of us. Second is the inclusiveness. Now, inclusiveness itself is, you have to define what inclusiveness means. If the inclusiveness means that those with whom the Taliban were fighting are to be included in the government, then I think we will be chasing the mirage. We have to be realistic. I have no brief about the Taliban. I would be the last person to support the Taliban, their ideology. But here we are talking about the United States, the superpower of the world, which entered into an agreement with the Taliban. And I hope that they entered in agreement with the Taliban in good faith. So if it is a good faith, then I think the natural corollary to that agreement is that there should have been some forward movement. It looks as if the United States withdrew from Afghanistan just for its own sake. They just wanted to save their $45 to $50 billion per annum in Afghanistan, which now they can which they can now use for some other good uses, including China. Already the United States has allocated close to $300 million for propaganda purposes against China. And now United States, and I remind you of the 14th April 2021, this year's, President Biden's speech when he gave the schedule of the withdrawal of the American troops from Afghanistan, in which he said, while we are withdrawing from Afghanistan, we will continue to be engaged with Afghanistan, but now our focus would be China. And with China, we'll have adversarial relationship, we will have competitive relationship, and we will have cooperative relationship. So I think die have been cast, and we have to look into the future from that prism as well. But having said that, but the question is, there's a big catastrophe which is staring us in the face, and that is the disaster with regard to Afghans. Almost when Taliban captured Kabul, the below poverty line graph was 60%. Now there's a fear that it would grow to 90%. And already $9.5 billion of the Afghan accounts have been frozen by the Americans. Taliban, when they entered, the coffers were empty. This is for the first time that you can talk about Afghanistan, where the United States spent 2 decades, 20 years in Afghanistan, but what they have given, that is the point. And I am sure you all enlightened scholars must be aware of the tribal structure in Afghanistan and how the Taliban, they won the narrative against the United States and other quote unquote occupation forces in Afghanistan. I don't think they were quite aware of the UN Security Council Resolution 1373 or 1368, which were under Chapter 7. So no one in Afghanistan, I can assure you that even today you talk about those resolutions and tell them that it was under Chapter 7, they'll be drawing a blank. But for them, the narrative was that now our land has been occupied, irrespective of what happened on 9/11. So United States failed to sell its narrative that why they were in Afghanistan. Then they also have failed to explain that how come these Daesh or ISIS could take root under their watches in Afghanistan during the past 1 decade, because Taliban were not heading the government in Afghanistan. Now they have entered into an agreement with the Taliban that they will not allow Afghanistan's soil to be used against the United States or their allies in the world. Now here lies the common cause for the United States, the EU, the NATO, Central and South Asian states which border Afghanistan. And that is that how to tackle this menace which has been left by the US-led NATO and EU, that they have left it in Afghanistan with the poverty touching almost 90% and almost 310,000 Afghans killed. Whosoever killed them, we have the figures, and how they were killed, we have the figures. So this is something we have to have soul searching while keeping in mind the ground realities which are being observed in Afghanistan. So this is what I have in my mind when I'm trying to give a preface and then a flavor of Afghanistan of today. And if in the present circumstances where the people are facing a catastrophe, if they are not given the humanitarian assistance in time, and even then if there are hagglings which are made for how to reach out to the common people and all that, and I think in that politics is playing more role than the humanitarian assistance. That needs to be addressed on urgent basis. Irrespective of indulging in polemics, it is important that all the countries, irrespective of their ideological bent, they have to reach out. Now, the legitimacy of the question I raised earlier was regarding inclusiveness and human rights and women's rights. If those are certainly those are very crucial issues. But inclusiveness, as per the sitting dispensation in Afghanistan's definition is concerned, they say that we have Uzbeks, Tajiks, Hazaras in our government. And then this is now my emphasis, that do you expect that they will take Abdullah, President Karzai, for that matter, Rashid Dostum or Ismail Khan into their government? I don't think that we are talking seriously. Reason is, can now Mr. Biden include President Trump into his administration, or for that matter, other Republicans into the administration, or for that matter, all other European governments which are democracies, they will do that and include the opposition. So it is not the case. And secondly, there was no rapprochement reached between the former dispensation led by President Ashraf Ghani, which was itself a house divided. Mr. Ashraf Ghani was not presiding over a united front in the country. It was a divided house, which is why Hikmatyar had his own way, Mr. Abdullah had his own way, and Mr. Ismail Khan had his own way, and Rashid Dostum had his own way, which is why that Mr. Ashraf Ghani was a lone man standing in the cold. And that's how he left while he was saying that he will shed his last drop of the blood to save Kabul, but he fled. He fled. Even his own security detail, they did not know. I've just come across 2 weeks ago an interview by his security chief, and he narrated the whole story. So this is also need to be pondered over. And more importantly, for the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan, it is a huge and very serious problem. And that problem is that if the poverty graph grows, and if the people don't have jobs, they don't have anything to eat, they will go for the safe pastures, safe places. And all neighbors of Afghanistan are vulnerable to refugee influx. And I think that severity of the problem need to be addressed by all. It is just not the duty of the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan, but all. Because if, for instance, we still are hosting 3 million Afghan refugees, and still the world community and the UNHCR were unable to create pull factors inside Afghanistan to take those refugees back or repatriate them. And if then our economy cannot afford to have more refugees, then we will be forced to push those refugees to your borders. Iran would not accept more refugees. They will be forced to push those refugees to Turkey, and Turkey will be forced to push those refugees to Europe. And I think Bulgaria would be the first country where those refugees will be knocking their doors. I'm frank and I'm blunt, reason being that these are the realities which are going to happen in coming weeks and months. We are not talking in terms of years or so. These are the things which are likely to happen. So I think there's a need to have an appraisal that how we can go about it. And then, of course, no one would want Daesh or ISIS taking roots in Afghanistan, or they indulge in activities. Already, we have been facing problems after the capture of Afghanistan by the Taliban. The number of attacks in our former tribal areas by the Tehrik-e-Taliban of Pakistan, or TTP, have increased. So are the some Baloch decisions. They have done it. And we made it, and we made no bones about it that India was involved, and it has activated its sleeper cells inside Afghanistan to do those mischiefs. So you also know that the geostrategic aspect of the problem inside Afghanistan, which affects the neighbors, especially the immediate neighbors, and there are countries which want to open a second front for Pakistan, I mean India, they have been involved. So these are our immediate concerns, and those need to be addressed. And for that, I think Pakistan has to, I don't think that enough has been done, but Pakistan has to raise the alarms in the world, telling the world that you cannot abandon Afghanistan, but you just cannot cherry pick that whom you have to, whom you would like to see in the so-called inclusive government. I stop here, and then I would love to have make my point clear in the question and answer session. Thank you very much for your patience.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Durrani. I think you presented quite a pessimistic picture, but let me turn back to your word that we have a complex security environment which has to be addressed by all. And I have very short question, and I would like to have also very short answers, 1-2 minutes from each of you, Plum, Tonchev, and Ambassador Durrani. Do you see the opportunity for a coordinated approach of all stakeholders towards Afghanistan, and who will actually get this stakeholders today together? How it will work in real terms, in reality? Plum, what is your opinion on that?
Well, I'm afraid that on this particular question, I'll be as pessimistic as Ambassador Durrani himself. I don't see plenty of room for close coordination in order to have the whole international community engaged and reading from the same page. I'm afraid that I don't see this happening in the foreseeable future. And I'm not giving you such a short answer only for the sake of saving time.
Ambassador, who should take lead? I mean, who can combine all this effort?
You're asking me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I think already, even if Taliban have not been recognized, the diplomatic activity is going on. For the US and European countries, it is Doha, from where they are conducting their business with the present Afghan government. And then immediate neighbors of Afghanistan also have their direct access to the Taliban, and their embassies are working in Kabul. So this you can always, and now there have been, we have had a format called Moscow format, and then we had Troika Plus. Those have been, meeting, and then now you can expand it to further. The question is, during American presence in Afghanistan, we used to have under the UN auspices a joint coordination monitoring board, JCMB, under UNAMA, United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. So they were conducting. I think first, a principal decision has to be taken by the stakeholders that they want to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. Then it would be only a matter of details that how they'll go about it. But first, they have to take a decision that whether they want to allow a disaster to take place in Afghanistan, and then they want to allow that ISIS or Daesh, they take their roots there, or they want to allow that more people should become, hungry, and then they, reach out to each other's throats, and then they also become recruits for the extremist elements, especially ISIS or Daesh. So it is all up to us. We have to take a decision. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. We'll now move to our second topic, which is about the current setup in Afghanistan and the role of Pakistan and other regional actors. So it's kind of continuation to the first question. We now have Krzysztof Iwanek, who is analyst based in Warsaw, Poland, and contributor to The Diplomat. And we have Miss Amina Khan, Director of Center for Afghanistan, Middle East, and Africa, which is part of ISSI. So I would like to ask our panelists to stay within 8 to 10 minutes time limit. So please, Chris, I invite you for your statement.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind invitation. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies. Well, what I would like to focus on is mostly Pakistan's role in Afghanistan. And well, I will have to admit, having listened to some of the opinions stated earlier today, that there will be divergent views now. I would like to very briefly touch upon three aspects. One is Pakistan's role in what happened till date, and two other points will be about what I think may happen in the near future, that is what positive role may Pakistan play for the current Afghan Taliban government in Afghanistan, as well as what differences there may be between Kabul and Islamabad in the coming time. So let me start with Pakistan's role, especially the role of the security establishment in Pakistan, but not only in the last years. Well, to call a spade, Pakistan was, that is the part of its establishment, was instrumental in getting the Afghan Taliban back to power. This is where Pakistan was where the Afghan Taliban were hiding. This is where they were getting assistance. This is from where they returned to power in Afghanistan. So, well, before moving on and touching upon how this relationship may change, one general point I would like to say is Pakistan is in good, its establishment is in good relations with the Afghan Taliban. There is no question about this. And I think Islamabad will enjoy one of the best relations now among various countries with the new government in Kabul. Although I also believe that the relations will transform. They will be positive, but there will be some challenges as well. And some aspects of their relations must inevitably change. So having said this second general point before moving on to how these relations may change in my view, and what will be their crucial points, I must say that, well, since Pakistan has played such a role, I would say that what Ambassador Durrani said before me, I feel compelled to comment on this, and it intertwines well with what I was about to say. It's kind of reach of Ambassador Durrani to say, and I quote him, that the EU cannot absolve of the responsibility that it left Afghanistan. And this statement was made in connection to what respected ambassador said a moment ago before stating this, that Daesh has grown in power in Afghanistan. Well, I don't think the Pakistani establishment is in a position to say that the EU cannot absolve itself of responsibility when the Afghan Taliban leadership was hiding for 20 years in Pakistan. Was the Daesh leadership hiding for 20 years in the EU? Because I haven't heard about it. And can we compare the humanitarian aid given by the EU to Afghanistan during the past 20 years to the humanitarian aid given by Pakistan to Afghanistan over the past 20 years? And building on these points, where I think Islamabad and Kabul relations will be good now and where Pakistan can help, I think there are main 3 points. First, Pakistan will be offering or is in position to offer financial, humanitarian, and technological assistance to Afghanistan. Of course, Pakistan's capabilities are maybe not comparable to some of the major donors to Afghanistan over the 20 years, but I'm sure Pakistan will help Afghanistan in certain ways. It did offer, for example, technological help to the first Taliban government in 1996-2001. But also that will not be enough. So I think that Pakistan's other important role will be to convince or try to convince other actors, other states to give more assistance to Afghanistan. Secondly, I think Pakistan's role will be in recognizing the Taliban government. That did not happen yet, and it was not officially stated. I must say this, that it will happen, but I think it will nevertheless. And besides formal recognition of the Taliban government, I think there are other forms of political international support that the Islamabad government may offer to the Kabul government. Well, I think we have already seen this with certain statements by Pakistani officials do hint and this. For example, we heard the national advisor to Pakistan's Prime Minister Moeed Yusuf questioning the legitimacy of Ashraf Ghani government and talking on CNN and saying that, well, since so many people were, to quote him, welcoming the Taliban and giving up their fight against the Taliban, this questions the legitimacy of Ashraf Ghani government. So statements like this and others, which I do not have time to refer to, suggest that the Pakistani government has used this occasion to undermine the legitimacy of Ashraf Ghani government until the Taliban have come to power and after they have come to power. So in a converse way, this is an indirect support of Taliban's political position in Kabul. This is like saying that we have to deal with the Taliban as they are, and as the logical result of this, finally recognize them. Here again, but for the last time, I would like to refer to what Ambassador Durrani said, that we cannot expect the Taliban to be as inclusive to include opposition forces to Taliban in Afghanistan now. And I think I must protest this. There was this ridiculous comparison by respected Ambassador Mr. Asif Durrani with American politics about whether the Biden administration can induct members of the Republican Party to their government, as if that was comparable to the Taliban inducing Uzbek or Tajik or other parts of opposition in Afghanistan. Well, in the US, the Republicans, as well as Donald Trump, can win elections again. Now, will the Taliban arrange elections and let minorities enter the government? I don't think so. So I think how Kabul will help is by offering assistance, by offering diplomatic recognition, and thirdly, by convincing other countries to offer that kind of help and diplomatic recognition to Afghanistan. But, and that is the last point of my presentation, I must also think, I must also note that I think the Islamabad-Kabul relation will transform now, will change. Some of the major forms of assistance which were being offered till date by Pakistan's establishment to the Afghan Taliban was offering them safe havens in Pakistan. Now, the Afghan Taliban do not need it anymore. They are now back in power in Kabul. So on one hand, this means that they don't need Pakistan's that kind of assistance no more. They don't need it anymore. And secondly, this means that the Afghan Taliban are now a bit at least more free, or I think even to a large degree freer in conducting their foreign policy. They can do it from Kabul. Pakistan does not have to and cannot play a go-between role anymore. So I think one issue between Kabul and Islamabad now is that Pakistan will see the Taliban attempting to be more free from Pakistan's influence. Then there are three other aspects at which I will have to stop. I will name them briefly because my time is up. Three other aspects which may be hiccups, which may be difficult points in relations between Kabul and Islamabad now. One is TTP, already mentioned, and on that we may perhaps largely agree that TTP is resurgent, and it will be an irritant in Kabul-Islamabad relations because the Afghan Taliban are apparently not so much helpful in fighting the TTP and not as helpful as Islamabad would like them to be. For instance, when during their offensive, the Afghan Taliban were freeing prisoners from Afghan government prisons, they have freed Daesh prisoners, but murdered their leaders, but they have freed some of the TTP leaders, but just let them go. So that's obviously something Islamabad must be and is concerned about. And one hears about the Afghan Taliban kind of absolving themselves in the sense that saying that the TTP is Pakistan's internal problem, although they also act from the Afghan soil. So I think it will remain an irritant, at least until Islamabad will reach some kind of political peace settlement with the TTP. And finally, because my time is up, the last 2 points will be very brief.
Please. Yes,
the
very
last
brief.
points are that the irritants between Kabul and Islamabad that will remain now will be the disputed border and Afghan refugees. And will have to stop here. Sorry for being too long.
Yes, thank you, Christoph. Thank you for your assessment of the situation. Now we have kind of perspective from Poland on this issue. Now I would like to invite our next speaker, Ms. Amina Khan, and after that I would like to ask Ambassador Durrani also to join this discussion on this particular question. So please, Ms. Khan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pokhalev. It's a pleasure to be a part of such a distinguished panel. And of course, Afghanistan is an area that is very close to, I think, every Pakistani's heart. Now, I think, you'll all agree with me that the situation in Afghanistan has drastically changed within with the Taliban takeover of the country, followed by the complete withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan. Now, while there is no doubt that with the US exit, and that too in the absence of a negotiated settlement, a military takeover by the Taliban was certainly expected. However, the manner and the speed at which the group has taken over the country was certainly not anticipated. Moreover, despite assurances to the Afghan masses, President Ashraf Ghani's rather unceremonious exit, along with the US's rather abrupt pullout, has left the Afghan masses angered, confused, and most importantly, abandoned. Now, it is probably due to this state of anger and confusion as well as abandonment that the Taliban faced little or rather limited resistance. Moreover, while many of us were foreseeing bloodshed, unlike the past, the group has adopted relatively non-offensive tactics. And thus, by far, the transition process has been relatively smooth. As the group, again, as we also faced very little resistance when it came to the Afghan National Security Forces. Moreover, while there has been internal displacement, so far, no large-scale exodus of refugees took place. And I think this was a reassuring factor for regional countries. Now, the situation clearly has left many questions unanswered, such as how will the group govern the country, what their rules mean for human or women's security, political freedom, and most importantly, regional peace and stability. Now, the implications of the fast-paced developments are yet to be fully, I think, felt in the region and beyond. Now, while the group had time and again assured that it would work towards the formation of an inclusive political setup, yes, unfortunately, we did not see that happening. While the group, however, has expanded its cabinet that includes members from other ethnic factions, I think the group will have to focus on a more representative political dispensation. And the fact that the group has said that this newly announced setup is an interim setup, this is somewhat reassuring and indicative that the group will focus on making the future government more inclusive. Now, while an interim government, with an interim government, I think the real test now for the Taliban has only just begun, which is certainly not limited to the capture of power, but I think it is more about legitimacy, recognition, acceptance, and of course, their performance. Now, even within the confines of this current Taliban-dominated setup, recognition for the government, I think, may not depend on inclusion so much, but whether they can deliver in terms of governance, in terms of foreign relations, human rights, and I think more importantly, counterterrorism assurances. It is imperative that the group ensures that Afghanistan does not become a safe haven for transnational terrorist groups for the region and the larger, global community. And I think it is important to highlight that counterterrorism assurances should not just be limited to the West or, for example, just to the US, but all, particularly now, while no country has recognized the group, the international community has been engaging with the group through Doha. We've been seeing this, and regional countries have been directly interacting with the group. Therefore, the group at this point, I think, is not looking for recognition, but engagement, which in its sense is de facto recognition. Now, domestically, the Taliban have inherited, very unstable and weak structures. And I think a lot will depend on how the Taliban consolidates its power, how it formulates policies towards Afghan institutions like the bureaucracy, the army. In other words, it is a work in progress. However, I think the group also realizes that if they do not deliver on their pledges of reform, primarily revolving around counterterrorism assurances, the group will lose the support and the recognition it so badly needs from the international community, but I think more so from regional countries to legitimize their rule. Now, a little, on the regional aspect. Certainly bewildered by, instability in Afghanistan, regional countries, I think, have come to the forefront to play a more prominent role in Afghanistan. Now, despite their previous differences and divergences, it appears that Afghanistan's immediate neighbors, namely Pakistan, Iran, Russia, China, and the Central Asians, they appear to be on the same page where they have a common regional vision for the future of Afghanistan. And I think this regional vision entails certainly regional ownership, recognition of a negotiated settlement with the Taliban as a major component, an inclusive political setup, as well as curbing transnational terrorist groups. Of course, this includes the illegal movement of arms and drugs. Now, while certainly there is regional consensus, the question here is, after the Taliban takeover, which regional country is willing to step in and play the role of a regional interlocutor? To play a bigger role. And while we have seen regional initiatives such as the recently held Moscow Forum or the upcoming regional mechanism in Tehran, I think it is pivotal for regional countries to push for a consolidated regional framework or mechanism, however you'd like to frame it, which should initially focus on providing regional assistance by contributing towards supporting the immediate requirements of the Afghan economy, as well as much needed humanitarian developmental aid. And I think this mechanism can then be expanded into a regional trade credit framework, as well as other areas of concern, particularly, a mechanism that can focus on counterterrorism initiatives. And this, of course, could be expanded. Now, by adopting, I think, this consolidated approach, it will provide the immediate neighborhood with leverage to convince the Taliban to push on their pledges of reform, be it inclusivity or honoring human and women rights. I think the Taliban are aware of the fact that the international community is going to take its time to engage with the group. And they are therefore more dependent on the region for engagement. Now, while there certainly can be regional, initiatives and even pressure, or for that matter, even the possibility of a regional monitoring mechanism to make the Taliban deliver, let's be honest, the onus does lie on the Taliban to deliver. Now, a lot has been said about Pakistan's role, and I don't think this is not surprising, considering the fact that, Pakistan has always been a convenient scapegoat. Taliban has been known, and so has its stance, which I must say has remained consistent. Since 2001, Pakistan has categorically been talking for a political solution to end the conflict, as well as to engage with the Taliban, which we believe is a major component of the future of Afghanistan. Now, it is unfortunate that it has taken the international community more than 2 decades of bloodshed, countless lives, not to forget the amount of money that has been wasted to realize this. Now, it is a fact, yes, Pakistan does have a relationship with the Taliban, but so do a number of other countries within and outside the region. Let us not forget the Taliban have evolved. They have learned the art of diplomacy, and they have extensively been engaging with the international community, which again refers to the point I made earlier on of de facto recognition. Moreover, the group has other sources of support, which entails logistical, financial, as well as other means. Therefore, I think Pakistan's policy is quite clear. Islamabad's policy is determined by a regional policy, and in terms of recognition, it will be regional in nature. And on a bilateral basis, I think Pakistan would like to expand its relationship with Afghanistan into other areas which were ignored by the previous dispensation in Afghanistan. If we look at the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan, particularly under President Ghani's regime, it was always limited to the security lens. And a lot depended on the outcome of the peace process. And hence, unfortunately, other areas that are always important in a bilateral relationship were ignored. Therefore, the hope is that with this new political dispensation, while security will remain an important facet, it should not be the sole or determining facet to govern the relationship. It needs to be broad-based. And I think it is extremely naive and disingenuous to put the onus on Islamabad. The fact is that if anything, we conveniently forget that the US legitimized the Taliban by signing the Doha Agreement in the absence of Kabul, and then by announcing their withdrawal without getting anything substantial in return from the Taliban. This, whether we like it or not, has emboldened the group. In fact, the only area where the Taliban did deliver was to halt attacks against American forces. And if we all remember, we saw very positive statements coming, figures like Secretary Pompeo clearly stating that the Taliban were the more responsible stakeholder. And again, let us not forget, one of the reasons why the Doha Agreement, while there are many issues to it, but one of the reasons why peace could not be achieved was President Ghani's unwillingness to accommodate and compromise on a political framework. Hence, I think it is time for the US to play its part by taking ownership and ensuring that it continues to remain engaged and provide much needed aid and assistance instead of shifting the onus on Pakistan, and I feel more so now on the region. Moreover, it is equally important for Europe to remain engaged and again, provide much needed support for the Afghan masses. Now, I personally feel that Afghanistan is being viewed as a regional issue, but I think we conveniently forget that Afghanistan always has had the seeds of being a global issue, and we have seen this. Therefore, it is imperative that the international community, along with regional countries, continue to be engaged with Afghanistan. Disengagement or talking about the freezing of assets, which already has taken place, or even imposing further sanctions, will only isolate the Afghan people. The Taliban will not be affected. And I think this is a commitment that the international community owes to the people of Afghanistan. So in the end, I feel that it is important that Afghanistan should be viewed as a collective and a shared responsibility. And one hopes that better sense prevails amongst the Taliban, where focus is on a future political setup that is inclusive, that is responsible, accountable, and lastly, one that serves the Afghan people. And at the same time, instead of shifting the onus of responsibility of Afghanistan on the region, or for that matter, convenient scapegoats, I think it is time to take ownership and view Afghanistan as a joint responsibility. I'll end here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Khan. Ambassador Durrani, would like to briefly join this discussion or shall we move forward?
Just small intervention. Number one, the US itself accused the Ashraf Ghani government of inefficiency, corruption, nepotism. So who am I to support Ashraf Ghani? Second, this Doha process started formally in 2013, but the Americans were in touch with the Taliban since 2010. So almost a decade of interaction they had. And in Doha, mind you, they brought in those people who were in Guantanamo Bay. And one of the person, Mullah Baradar, was in our jail for the past 10 years, whom Americans insisted that he has to be released for negotiations. So Pakistan had held prominent Taliban leaders in confinement. They were not enjoying the sanctuaries. And mind you, then those who are telling us about the sanctuaries, then they don't understand the real history of Afghanistan, which has been a graveyard for the British, for the Soviets, and then ultimately Americans had to leave it. And then we have no wherewithal and no match to the wherewithal of the Americans as far as Afghanistan, their military prowess was concerned. So Pakistan, in fact, we had our historical relationship with the Afghans. Even during Ashraf Ghani's time and throughout, almost 50 to 60,000 Afghans straddled our border every day without visas. This facility is not available to the Afghans in their neighborhood, whether it is Iran, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, or China. So I think there is a need to have real knowledge about the Afghan society, their tribal system, how it works. And then there are divided tribes between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So they have intermarriages and they have access there. And more than that, I'm sure our scholars would be aware of the code, Pashtun code of Pashtunwali, which means Melmastya, which means hospitality. Revenge means badal. And then ghairat. Ghairat means honor. So these three major things are the part of the Pashtun code of conduct, Pashtunwali, and under which, in fact, Taliban fought. So I think this Cambridge and Harvard solutions did not work in Afghanistan. It's unlikely to work in Afghanistan. So that is why. And then we are not naive that if the British, the Soviets, or the Americans, if they could not control Afghanistan, we will control Afghanistan. I think then those scholars who think that we have had any kind of a sway on Taliban, then I think something is wrong with the research, their research or their understanding of the issue. So, and then more than that, Afghanistan's 50% of territory was under the Taliban control for the past 15 years. So I think those researchers who are seriously researching these issues, so when you have 50% of the territory, they don't need sanctuaries in Pakistan. And I've served Afghanistan, and I've been dealing Afghanistan since 1979 when the Soviet troops entered Afghanistan. Then I was a journalist, and I traveled with the Mujahideen. These are the same Mujahideen who turned out to be Taliban. So I think we need to have a history of Taliban also, how they came into being. They are not puppets. Had they been the puppets, then Ashraf Ghani was also our puppet. Then Karzai was also our puppet. And then Ahmad Shah Massoud was also our puppet because they were staying with us. So this is not the issue. This is Afghanistan historically has been a transit country. Afghanistan has been looking for mentors in their history because of their internecine wars, and Afghanistan will continue to be like that. Afghanistan has seen only a period of 4 decades of peace in their history. That was 1933 till 1973 during King Zahir Shah's time, not before, not afterwards. So I think we have to actually have the actual history of Afghanistan and those people, they live in the 18th century mindset, Afghans, overwhelming majority. I'm not talking of those who are living in Kabul or they have migrated to Europe and then they came back as ministers in Afghanistan. So this is something we have to talk about realities. And these are the things thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I would be glad to continue this interesting exchange of opinions. Unfortunately, we have to move forward as we have 2 more speakers. But one of question which just came after your remarks, Ambassador, how do you know what happened in Afghanistan? And it's not a question to you, it's a more general question. Most of the foreign journalists, they actually left the country, while Afghani journalists, they have been severely censored, as we know. How we know what happened in the country? And by the way, outside Kabul, because we have pictures from Kabul, but what happened in the country, how we can make our analysis based on what information, and the information comes from what sources. But let's move forward, as I said, with the last 2 speakers who will share their opinions on the roles of stakeholders towards Afghanistan. And we have Barbara Clement, research fellow at the Central European Institute of Asian Studies, and we have Dr. Talat Shabir, Director, China-Pakistan Studies Center, Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad. So, Barbara, welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. So I'm very happy to be here today and to speak on this panel. Very
and please stay within the framework of 8 to 10 minutes. Yeah, we have this limitation and we are running out of time.
Great. Yeah, I'll make my presentation really brief. So what I wanted to talk about today is practically the Chinese role in Afghanistan. What is that likely to look like, and what are the prospects for some economic engagement, or whether humanitarian assistance or financial investment. I think this is important also because in the wake of the Taliban's takeover, there have been a lot of op-eds in international media or in other publications kind of discussing Chinese role and how that has been changing. However, my argument based on research and precedent is that Chinese interests are threefold. The first one is strategic, the second one is security, the third one is the economic one. And although those 3 interests are kind of intertwined, I would argue that the Chinese interest is very deeply tied to the security and the strategic one, first and foremost, whereas the economic one is kind of something that goes along that, also because the Chinese strategy for a long time has been using the economic investment as a way to stabilize the country. And the kind of the economic aspect of it has been downplayed. Now, when it comes to the first one, geostrategic, I think that looking at the history of Chinese engagement, Afghanistan has been kind of on the periphery of Beijing's interest, and it only became important, for example, if we were looking at the Soviet invasion through the prism of China-Soviet split. and also because of the geographic proximity of the border and the kind of Soviet activity in those regions. That first and foremost why primarily China started to be interested and more active. Whereas then we saw after the Soviet withdrawal, China even closed its consulate in the country, and we saw this reemergence of or increased interest only recently, once again because of the wider regional importance, not only Afghanistan itself. The second one is the security implications. Now, I've already mentioned the border shared between the country. Although the border is very, it's a mountainous region. There is the road finishes long, far from the border, so it's actually quite challenging for anyone to cross it. But I think looking at the history of some militants active in the group, or even most recently the attack that was carried out by a person with a Uyghur background, it clearly demonstrates the Chinese interest that over the years has been appealed to when you're looking at the research from the 90s and how China pragmatically has interacted with the Taliban on this pretext of kind of some type of a deal that if the group is able to keep lid on some of those militants from carrying out attacks against Chinese interests, they will be open to some kind of economic cooperation. And in fact, we've been seeing some type of interest in economic activity already since the 90s, when some Chinese companies were supposed to, or even carried out works to repair a grid, or working on telecommunication networks in the country. Now, fast forward to today, I would say that the new era is the one that is kind of presented through the BRI narrative and economic interests. And this is something that has become particularly more prominent over the past 8 years, I would say. I think that the investments that were or some of the projects that started before that are today kind of weaved into this narrative. And we have three main parts, which the first one is connectivity, roads and rails, kind of the more infrastructure part of the BRR. Then the second one is export. So on this one, we can talk about air corridors, and particularly if you're looking at things like pine nuts or saffron. And the third one are minerals. So most prominently, I think the investments in Mes Ayna copper mine, which is one of the biggest investments. Now, on all of those three points, I think that while under the Taliban's government, a lot of people assume that this is something that China would be looking forward to, there are practical challenges and issues to them when it comes to exports. So we have seen over and over and again, when you're looking at the particular air corridors, some of the issues when it comes to supply chains and how the value out of these is being delivered. But I think it was actually one of those more beneficial cooperations that we saw on both sides, although I would argue that China has saw much more positive outcome from this. On the side of minerals development, however, I think that the main issue there has been, inability of the previous government to kind of deliver on the project. I mean, we've seen that since the project kind of started, it has been stalled for several years, and there have been often the claims about the security and safety at some of those projects. However, if you actually go and you see the details, Taliban even claimed before that they are willing not to attack some of those projects. And it seems that a lot of those issues were associated with the economic feasibility of some of the other related projects. So for example, in Mes Aynak particularly, there was supposed to be another part that turned out to be not efficient. And then the whole project in the eyes of the Chinese investors wasn't actually worth pursuing, and the negotiations didn't really end up anywhere. Now, probably the most interesting part also in terms of potentially connecting Afghanistan into the wider CPEC corridor is the potential to extend some of the infrastructure, such as railway corridors. In fact, there is already a national railway plan that was kind of presented and established on the side of the on the Afghan side, and actually improving security would allow implementing routing rail through Helmand and Kandahar provinces that in the past was challenging because of the being Taliban stronghold and leading opium producing region. However, even in this case, this would probably take several years, and China will first need to see that Taliban is able to maintain security and stability in those areas before proceeding with any type of project. However, there is a potential and a high likelihood that this could lead to, increased cooperation, not only between China and Afghanistan, but also with Pakistan, that the Chinese side has been using in their, cooperation and communication with the Afghan authorities. I think I could stop here, and then if you have any further questions, I'll be happy to answer that. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Barbara. And now I would like also Dr. Tawat Shabir for his brief presentation. Please, Dr. Shabir.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's being last speaker is, being hard on nerves of the listeners, but I'll still would like to make few comments with regards to the topic that I was given. In fact, I was to speak about connectivity of regional connectivity, Belt and Road Initiative from Asia to Europe. But since I work on Pakistan-China relations, I work on CPEC and Belt and Road Initiative. So I would just like to make few comments with regards to why is this regional connectivity important from Pakistan's perspective, and what should the larger regions like European Union or other parts of the world come into this. When we talk of connectivity, we understand this is the most important factor if we want to have some kind of economic arrangement for Afghanistan to be placed, because we talk of peace in Afghanistan because we talk of connectivity to Central Asia and beyond. We talk of connectivity because Belt and Road Initiative is the ambitious project of China, is also actually largely driven by connectivity vision of the Chinese leadership. Regional connectivity flow is a concept, is like flow of goods, flow of services from one country to another country, of course, from one region to another region, people and knowledge. So, and it is, I think, right to say that first there has to be a regional concept of regional connectivity, and then it can follow with the connecting various regions also as international community. Now, at the moment, we find this world is facing a kind of economic slump. So and it's a kind of disorder when you see this part of the world. So there's a very deliberate and articulated financial Marshall Plan is required. But what should be the contours? What should be the outline of that Marshall Plan? I think that is the question that connectivity would serve in times to come. Now, many of you talked about China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is effectively can be enhanced. It can effectively enhance scope of connectivity if it is interpreted in a holistic way. Belt and Road Initiative is highly effective arrangement with major projects in energy, infrastructure, transport sector. And according to recent studies, Belt and Road Initiative has 203 projects of railways and roads, 109 power plants, 41 energy pipelines. Now, by May 2020, China had signed 200 cooperation agreements with 138 countries and regions and 30 international organizations under BRI framework. You can see the quantum of the cooperation and the quantum of connectivity cooperation that China is looking at, of course, the world, the countries, regions which have signed any kind of MOU with China also believe in the concept of global connectivity in BRI framework. China, being the global economic power, is one of the prominent investors into Eurasia. We all know that this deep economic engagement allows Beijing to make various connectivity routes passing from South Asia to Central Asia, Russia to Europe. If peace and stability prevails in Afghanistan, the benefits of economic connectivity will multiply. There will be remarkable trade and commerce activities starting from the heart of Asia, reaching to Europe. For example, BRI's flagship project, CPEC, has its one end in warm waters of Indian Ocean and the other end opens in Central Asian nations. Pakistan is already enhancing its connectivity to Central Asian countries by linking this connectivity bridge with Russia, Europe. I think many countries are going to benefit from this, this stream of connectivity. The Europeans have also realized this factor and stepped up economic cooperation with Beijing, despite the few objections and reservations and resentment by the United States of America. EU's decision to complete negotiation with China on comprehensive agreement on investment earlier this year, and the decision by several European Union countries to join China-backed Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in 2015 are some of the examples of Europe's willingness to get into the fold of Belt and Road Initiative or fold of new upcoming financial arrangement that we see backed by China. BRI push into Europe has made it hard for EU to craft a united approach towards China, keep some aspiring Eastern European entrants to block on board. Now, BI beneficiaries like Hungary and Greece have pushed back, or at least expressed their reservations on EU's attempt to criticize China as a bloc. So, there are some critical factors, factors that drive the ambition of Belt and Road Initiative positively or negatively. The new Eurasian land bridge is part of Belt and Road Initiative to improve transportation links between China and Europe. It's a branch of the new Silk Road economic belt across Eurasia. The complementary 21st century maritime Silk Road consists of sea routes to Africa and Mediterranean. And in times to come, we see there's a lot of synthesis between these two, and that will help connectivity the way China looks at it. The origins of Eurasian land bridge were market-driven in response to demands of lead firms in Eurasian value chains. The rail services are consistent with the EU and Chinese hopes for improved connectivity, reflected in major foreign policy announcements made by Chinese president and by European Commission. The resulting connectivity is likely to survive any bilateral political debacle because the economic foundation seems to be very strong. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think there are new geopolitical realities. There are geoeconomic realities that the world is facing. And I think Pakistan and EU should collaborate to increase the dividends of economy that is driven by the concept of connectivity. And of course, as you discussed, peace in Afghanistan is actually very vital to this connectivity. Now, in the end, I would just make two brief recommendations. One is that we need to, in fact, decrease financial barriers by creating a network of joint or multilateral financial system, because the poor countries, the developing countries are facing problems, facing impediments with regards to connecting to the global world's financial system. The second, which is of course important from Pakistan's point of view, and of course Belt and Road Initiative's point of view, is to link CPEC with new Eurasian land bridge so that the new connectivity link can be developed fast between Pakistan and the European Union community. This is all from my side. Thank you very much for inviting me over. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Shabir, for sharing your thoughts on the issue. With this, we exhausted our list of speakers, and I would like now to open the opportunity for everyone to make comment or ask a question. So you have, this option, raise hand in the right part of your monitor, or you just signal me, or you can put your question on chat box. But before we move to the questions from the audience, may I ask you, all our participants, how do you see actually the role of European Union? And it will be particularly interesting to see how our Pakistani analysts see the role of European Union in Afghanistan. Obviously, it will be difficult for European Union to have a big role when Europe actually is a champion, and it's a human rights, rule of law, etc., etc., etc. Of course, Europe will plays and will play the role in providing human security. But what do you see will be the future role of EU? What leverages EU has in Afghanistan? And the same question actually is what would be the future role of Pakistan? Of course, we touch upon some issues. I see Dr. Apostolov has risen a hand. Let's take this question or comment, and after that we'll come back to our panelists. Dr. Apostolov, can you hear me?
Yes, can you?
Yes, of course.
Great. First, I would like to ask thank you about the invitation for this event, and without losing any more time, I would like to ask the question: if the international recognition of Afghanistan sort of lags behind, do you think it may radicalize the situation in the country and actually stimulate the terrorist resurgence? Or concerning the Western countries, if Pakistan, China, and Russia give recognition sooner because of their own interest, won't this disturb the possibilities of Western presence in Kabul even further? And my second question is towards excuse me, about the terrorists of the three different circles. Do you think that India shouldn't be in the circle, in the first circle, because it may not, it's towards Mr. Tonchev. Do you think that India should be in the first circle because it may not be a neighbor of Afghanistan, but actually it's quite interested in what happens there. Two of its neighbors are actually quite active, as it became clear now. Pakistan and China are quite active in Afghanistan, plus India made quite a few economic projects in Afghanistan that are now put at risk with the change of power. Don't you think that India should be also in the first circle? Thank you.
And your first question is addressed actually to whom, or to any of our
well,
panelists?
It's mostly to anyone, but actually also to our Pakistani colleagues, because I think that Pakistan is the most consistent country in its relationships with Afghanistan and the Taliban. So I'll be interested in there, but actually it's all to everybody actually, including the Western, because after it's the Western role in Afghanistan that's now mostly at risk. If we think about it, that the Taliban have quite a few meetings. We know about the Doha meeting, but there were quite a few meetings with China and Russia. So there could be some sort of preparation for eventual recognition, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. There are several questions already. Please, who would like to take there's questions and speak first from our panelists. Yes, Ms. Khan.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Well, as I said, I think in the beginning, I think Ambassador Durrani can also respond, but as I mentioned in the beginning, I think it's not so much about recognition, but more about engagement. And I think it's necessary to engage with the group because that is de facto recognition. And I think if we repeat the mistakes of the past and we continue to disassociate with the Taliban, you're just going to embolden them even more. And yes, you're going to push them into, the hands of undesirable elements. It's very much there because you need to give them an incentive. And I think it's important to understand that the Taliban haven't really been in power. They are trying to consolidate themselves within the country. As I said, they have inherited a lot. There are a number of weak structures. There are issues with, the so-called established institutions within Afghanistan. And I think we saw how unstable they were when we saw the collapse of the security forces. So I think time needs to be given to the Taliban, but this certainly does not absolve them of their pledges of reform or for them to deliver. But I think we need to have realistic expectations from the group. And let us remember, you had a so-called democratic government within Afghanistan for the past 20 years, and that government, whether it was under President Karzai or or President Ghani, was not able to deliver. So I think we should also have a barometer and have again realistic expectations from the Taliban. It is essential. I think engagement does not mean recognition. Engagement means that you provide assistance to the Afghan people, not to the Taliban, and hence you have some leverage over the group to deliver on their pledges of reform. Because if you completely dissociate from them, what incentive do they have to deliver on those promises of reform? And let us not forget, when we talk about human or women's rights, and I'm not an advocate for the group, but we have to be, honest and call a spade a spade. What was the percentage of, human rights or women's rights in Afghanistan? How many, women were actually represented? Certainly, progress has been made, but not to the extent of having, international presence for 20 years. Even in the negotiating team in Doha, I think there were total 3 Afghan women that were taking part from the Afghan side while negotiating with the Taliban. So I think one has to be fair here. Certainly, there are expectations. The expectations the Taliban know that they have to deliver on. Let us give them time and engage with the group, because it is only through engagement that you'll be able to make them accountable. And if I may, I would like to just add on the India point, although I think it's for Mr.
Yes, please.
Yes, look, India, I think it does have a role in Afghanistan. Everybody recognizes it, but I think at the very moment, it is immediate neighbors that have a more pivotal role to play in Afghanistan. And I think it is important to realize this aspect. The Indians do not have immediate concerns in Afghanistan. They don't share a border with Afghanistan. And yes, while they have made, economic investments in the country, I think, in my opinion, India has a role, but at this particular point, I think too many cooks spoil the broth. And I think they can be included at a second or third stage. Certainly not denying them their role, but I think for now, it is the immediate neighborhood, because it's the immediate neighborhood that faces the direct consequences from instability in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tonchev and other panelists after Mr. Tonchev who would like to join this discussion.
Thank you. Very interesting points raised by Dr. Apostolov. On the first question on recognition or no recognition of the Taliban government, I would agree with Dr. Khan that indeed what we are seeing and on what we are likely to see in the foreseeable future, of course, is de facto recognition of the interim Taliban government, whatever the name of the authorities is. I think that Russia is a case in point. Mind you, the Taliban are still on Russia's blacklist of terrorist organizations, and at the same time, Moscow is hosting international talks, including the representatives of the Taliban. Russia never shut down its embassy in Kabul. Russia is very much in talks with the Taliban. despite all its concerns in terms of security in Central Asia and all that, yes, we are seeing de facto recognition. Will the lack of recognition lead to radicalization? I don't think that's an immediate concern right now, but there might be indeed a distinction between Western stakeholders not recognizing or vehemently refusing to recognize the Taliban and some neighboring countries that do engage the Taliban and offer some sort of de facto recognition. Yes, there might be an embarrassing distinction there. On the second question on India, I think that India would very much like to be in the first row, in the first circle, within the circle of immediate interlocutors. It is true that India was heavily invested in Afghanistan over the past 20 years. It has invested money, it has invested political capital in Afghanistan over the past 20 years. And of course, India has always seen Afghanistan as a political investment or a strategic investment as a counterweight to Pakistan, because Pakistan has always seen Afghanistan as its backyard and its security, ensuring some sort of security depth. And then the Indians were also interested in having their foot in Afghanistan precisely because of this reason. And then you may remember that the Indians have been talking about this investment in Chabahar, the port of Chabahar in Iran, so that they could then construct a transport corridor through Afghanistan, further north towards Central Asia. But right now, and again, I would agree on this point with Dr. Han, that right now India is on the back foot. I don't think that as we speak, India can actually claim a significant role in Afghanistan. They will have to wait for their turn, which is why I placed them in the second circle of what I call actors in waiting. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Tonchi, for sharing your analysis. I would like to see if, yes, Krzysztof Iwanek would like to add to this.
Thank you. I'll try to be very brief. There were so many questions. I cannot, and I do not have the knowledge to reply to all of them. So just quick points regarding few of the questions. First, about the connection between the recognition of the Taliban government and radicalization. Well, I think in a way that there will be a connection, not with radicalization per se, but one of the Afghan Taliban leaders, after they took over Kabul, has already said that if you do not help us, if we do not receive humanitarian aid and diplomatic recognition, there will be more violence. So it's not them becoming more radical, but they are using the leverage of violence, or to use it, to use different words. The Taliban are holding the Afghan population hostage, and they demand aid and recognition, threatening that if they do not, there will be more violence. So in that way, that if there is no recognition, and especially if there is no humanitarian aid, there will be maybe not more ideological radicalization, but more violence, since the Afghan Taliban will be hoping that that way they may compel international actors. As for India, I would say that India is now nearly completely out of the picture. Very important point to make is that India has now no capacity, and had no capacity for the past 20 years to protect its initiatives in Afghanistan. Yes, it had plenty of initiatives, and they were quite successful, most of them. But since India had no security-related presence in Afghanistan, the security of those initiatives, of those investments and projects India made relied on the US and other allied forces which have left. So India is now mostly out of the picture, and I would certainly not include India in the first first circle does. And now very briefly about India and Iran. Yes, that I think is what India's role is reduced to mostly now, in the sense that Pakistan has the leverage over Afghanistan, regardless of who is in power in Kabul and who is in power in Islamabad, the leverage of geography, the leverage of transit that mostly goes to Afghanistan. When it's a land trade, it goes through Pakistan. So the more Iran builds its capacities to trade, its infrastructure, and it changes its law to trade with Afghanistan more effectively, the less Afghanistan is dependent on Pakistan. So the only role India can now play is to further develop the Chabahar port, although that has not been very successful, to be honest. Finally, about what I have, I hope a little bit of time to reply to what Ambassador Durrani said. 2 points: the accusation of corruption against President Ghani's government. Yes, he has been accused of corruption even by the Americans, but that does not mean that the Taliban have more legitimacy now than Ashraf Ghani had. I mean, it's a completely different side. One side was a legitimate government but corrupt, the other side took over power through violence. So I don't think we should compare these. And finally, I'll stop at this, about the Taliban, about the Pakistan not offering sanctuaries to Taliban. Well, that's simply not true. Of course, they were given sanctuaries. Mullah Baradar was arrested, yes. So if Pakistan could arrest Mullah Baradar, why could it not arrest the entire Quetta Shura that, was sheltered in Pakistan without much hindrance for many of the past years? And I will stop at this to let others speak as well.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. We'll take last 2 questions, and after that, I will give the possibility to all our panelists for some concluding remarks. First, I would like to invite Mirela Petkova to ask her question. And while she is connecting, I will read the other question, which comes from Deriaidin Okur. What do the panelists think about the role of international law in the Afghanistan issue? Mirela, would you join and ask your question, please, very briefly, because we are running out of time.
Just to check, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. This has been very interesting, and I'm very happy to participate and to be part of CCAPS. I had a question that is for no particular speaker, but just in general for the people that discussed the role of China in the region. Of course, China comes with a big economic, proposal for the region. But what I was wondering is under what circumstances would Chinese actors, whether they're investors, whether they're banks, or whether they are construction companies, be willing to set a strong foothold in the region? And in particular, I'm interested in whether you see a possibility for Chinese security contractors accompanying such projects. We've seen that in high-risk environments in countries like Africa. So I wondered whether that's a possibility, or it's more likely that we don't see any high-impact projects in Afghanistan backed by China in the near future. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mirela, for your question. So we have 2 questions for all panelists, and I'll now give the opportunity to them to comment on this 2 questions or in general, because after that we'll wrap up this interesting discussion. Ms. Tonchev, let me start with you first, please.
I'll be glad to answer the second question raised by Mirela Petkova on China and the BRI in Afghanistan. I would say I fully agree with what Barbara said previously, that for the time being, security seems to get the upper hand in terms of considerations and priorities. I think that the Chinese may need some time before they invest heavily in Afghanistan. They will make sure that security is in place. And the 2 investments in Afghanistan, a copper mine and an oil field in northern Afghanistan, they haven't been operational yet precisely because of security considerations. So the BRI in Afghanistan may sound promising, but I would say not just yet. I don't really remember what the first question was, Jordan. If you could please help
It
me
was
out
about
with this.
international law in Afghanistan.
International law in Afghanistan, indeed. Again, it may take a lot of, what shall I say, creative interpretation of laws in Afghanistan for the time being. I'm sorry if I'm being so cynical. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tonchev. Ambassador Durrani, please unmute.
I think many issues have been dealt with, and there would be some unending discussion. And there are many issues. There are perhaps diversified views. Perhaps it's a lack of understanding. And seeing is believing. I hope those scholars who talk about Taliban and others, they visit Afghanistan as well and deal with that. I've seen certain scholars from Harvard and Cambridge visiting for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then they write a book on Afghanistan. So I have had discussion with them as well. I was deputy chief of mission in Afghanistan from 2005 till 9. My point is that Afghanistan lives in 18th century mentality, which means that it's a victor and the vanquished mindset. You like it or not, it will happen. And that is the case. And this is what has happened. And Americans had to leave Afghanistan after 20 years. So whether we like it or not. As regards international law, then international law should not be applied selectively. There's no cherry picking about the international law. And if the law is that, if we are expecting democracy in Afghanistan, then there are many countries in the world which are not democracies. And the international community is engaging with them, including there are many Gulf monarchies. And when you talk about so-called human rights, women's rights and all that, I think those are there. But since those are rich countries, so I think we deal with them. So let's be frank, let's be honest to each other. So this is also very important. And then when you talk about these Afghanistan and Pakistan relationship, we have a symbiotic relationship, and we are not apologetic about that. India did try to open a front in Afghanistan for us. So India was fighting us in Afghanistan. And then whatever we did was because of India. And if the Americans were insensitive to Pakistan's sensitivities, then I think Americans know it, and we know it, and we told them in so many words. So that's something which need to be kept in mind. Mind you, Pakistan is not a walkover for the Indians, and we will not allow them to use Afghanistan as a second front against Pakistan. So this is what we did earlier also, when there was a nexus between Iran, India, and Russia before the 9/11. And this is what we stood, and we told them in so many words. If there are some of our scholars are unaware of those things, then I refer them to read what discussions took place with Colin Powell and others. So those were, and Bob Woodward's books are full of them. We did tell them. So these were, we told them that this would try to have political solution in Afghanistan. Americans wanted a kinetic solution, and they failed. So I think this is something which need to be kept in mind. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Ivanik, would you like also to comment on this last two questions?
I think I've taken a lot of time, so I would let others speak as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move to Ms. Amina Khan.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Sorry,
yes,
we're having a bit
yes, we do.
Okay, great. I agree with Mr. Tonchev regarding international law, and I think the less said, the better on that front. Now, regarding the larger BRI and the extension of CPEC to Afghanistan, just a quick point here. Do remember that initially, particularly in President Ghani's time in power, he was reluctant to move forward on the extension or even the possibility of the extension of the BRI or CPEC to Afghanistan. And he did put certain limitations on it and conditionalities that if Pakistan provided the land route of Wagah to the Indians, then there would be some discussion on this front. However, as we have seen, the Taliban have been very open and forthcoming on regional connectivity, and they have openly voiced their support for the extension of CPEC to Afghanistan. So I think this is one thing that does, of course, tick the boxes for Beijing. But I think I agree that at the end of the day, regional connectivity is something that will, be a second-tier approach for now. The Chinese, like all regional countries, are more focused on the Taliban, not so much, coming up to the expectations of, say, human rights or inclusivity. But again, it's about counterterrorism assurances. As long as as Afghanistan does not pose a threat to regional countries, it doesn't host transnational terrorist networks. For the Chinese, it's the ETIM. While some believe that that's an exaggerated threat, but the Chinese feel that that is a major issue for them. So I think the focus is going to be on whether the Taliban can deliver on that front. And certainly, there is room for Chinese investment in Afghanistan. The environment is opening up. It is favorable, but I think a lot will depend on how the Taliban deliver when it comes to fighting the ETIM and ISKP. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't see our last two speakers, Barbara Clemen and Dr. Tawat Shabir, although they will be also perfect, persons to answer especially question on China. But as we are already exhausted our time, I think that we have to move to the closing this very interesting, very frank, and I would say open discussion with participation of European and Pakistani think tanks. Obviously, we see that we have very complex and I would say even complicated security situation, which requires, of course, concerted approach from stakeholders. And I hope that our discussion and actually discussions like this, of course, contribute to better understanding of the situation, and of course, mainly to finding solutions. On that note, I would like to thank on behalf of Sofia Security Forum and the Southeast European Center for Asia Pacific Studies, all participants, and particularly our speakers. I hope that we'll continue. This was just the beginning of long-term cooperation. May I invite Madam Ambassador Aftab also to say some concluding remarks, and after that I would like to invite Ms. Khan also to thank our participants on behalf of ISSI. Madam Ambassador Aftab.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all the speakers and all the participants and the Sofia Security Forum for arranging this wonderful discussion. I certainly learned a lot from it. And I think we had a very vibrant discussion, which was useful. And I think that this gives us a very, very positive sign that we can continue with these discussions and these dialogues. And there is an interest, and that there will be so many more opportunities, hopefully, to do this again and again. So thank you once again to all for attending. And we assure the Embassy of Pakistan will, of course, be available at any time to help and facilitate in these kinds of ventures. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Ms. Khan, I would like first to say that we are glad that we have such a partner as your think tank, and I'll be glad to continue our cooperation.
Yes, thank you so much. It truly has been a very enlightening discussion, and I think we can all agree to disagree, but that is the whole point of having these academic exchanges. And I think certainly we have learned a lot, and this just shows that there is so much more to discuss and the need for engagement, whether it's in Afghanistan or on other issues. So from the center, for Afghanistan, Middle East and Africa at the Institute of Strategic Studies. I would once again like to thank the Sofia Security Forum for this initiative. And we hope, because Afghanistan is an ongoing issue, that maybe we could make this into a series of conversations on Afghanistan. So thank you once again. And of course, on behalf of Ambassador Chaudhry's side as well.
Yes, thank you very much. Once again, thank you all participants for your active engagement and active participation in this interesting discussion. And I hope to see you on other events which we'll offer to your attention. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.